A Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi everyone, it's Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone, and this is episode 2 in our training support series. And today we are going to look at race day planning, everything you need for a memorable day. So a lot of you will be doing an event as part of your training. Some of you will be training to keep fit and healthy, and some will be training to lose weight. But a lot of you will be training for an event, and obviously, after all that training, you want to make sure that you get it right on the day. So this podcast very much focuses on getting everything spot on for your big day. And there's so many different aspects to it. And over the years, I have got some of these things right and some of them horribly wrong. So I'm just going to give you a few little bits from my experiences over the years, and hopefully you can learn from some of my mistakes. First up, chances are you may well be traveling a bit of distance from home for your event. A lot of people will be doing local events, but if you're doing something like a marathon or a half marathon, chances are that you'll probably be traveling. You may need to stay over. So first up is making sure you choose your hotel right. It's so easy these days, obviously, to choose hotels. You go on some of these aggregator sites or sites like booking.com or hotels.com, and you just get a list of properties within X miles of where your race is. Looks dead easy, and it is, but you can get that horribly wrong. So a couple of years ago, I did the Lisbon half, and the race goes over, I can't remember the name of the bridge, but fantastic, huge bridge. It felt like it was about a mile long. I looked, and that was the start area, and I looked at the map and thought, yeah, I shall get a hotel near that start. Unfortunately, I didn't look deep enough at the information the organisers sent, and there were a couple of roads that were closed for the day, and I chose a hotel that actually looked on paper like it was about, a mile from the start, and it ended up being about 5 miles from the start because I had to go around the houses to get there. So be really careful when you book your hotel and think really carefully about it, and look at all the information the race organisers send you. And of course, if you've got an out and back course, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay near the start, or do you want to stay near the finish? Something like the London Marathon, for example. Do you want to be right out in Greenwich near the start area, or do you want to be in the central London or near Buckingham Palace area for the finish? And that's a really tricky one because obviously the benefit of being near the start is that you can probably have a little stroll to the start area rather than having to get the train. But if you stay at the finish, then you've got the advantage, obviously, of no travel required at the end. So it's a bit of a dilemma. I've done both. I stayed in Greenwich one year and literally had a 5-minute walk to the start. But as I said, the flip side was that I then had to get the train or the DLR at the end of the race, which is quite a lot of hassle, really, because it's so busy everywhere, obviously, in central London after the event. So probably in hindsight, I've done that race 9 times. I probably stayed at the finish most of the time. Maybe I've done a couple at the start. And in hindsight, that would be my preference, staying at the finish, trying to keep away from the tube network because it is obviously so busy. So that's something you need to be really aware of on these out and back courses. When you've got a loop course, start and finish in the same place, then obviously it's not such a big deal. But clearly, don't leave it too late, because the later you book, the chances are the more expensive that hotel will be. So as soon as you get your entry, book your hotel. The good thing is, of course, with a lot of these websites, you don't actually have to pay. You might pay a little bit of a premium by not paying until late on, and that's often an advantage. So that's what I normally do now. So you're at your hotel, you've been to the expo, etc. If there is one, what do you do the night before? Well, obviously, it's all about how much sleep you get. And the better you sleep the night before, the better probably you're going to perform on race day, given all the other variables, obviously, like how much training you've done. It's really important that you have that meal, quite your last meal, quite early. I always try and eat at about 5 or 6 o'clock, because the key is you want to make sure you've digested it properly. And without sounding too gruesome on here, what goes in, you really want to have come out by race morning. Before you start the race, you want to make sure that there's no big pasta meal still in there sloshing around. So the earlier you eat the night before, the better the chances of that happening. If you eat too late, probably going to be a problem. And obviously only eat what you're used to. Sounds obvious, but again, you don't want to be leaving it to a change of meal because you've not booked your restaurant properly, or you've picked a restaurant and you haven't looked at the menu properly. If you're used to having pasta with a tomato sauce, don't have one with a creamy white sauce. Now, you hopefully will have used your long runs to go through all this. It's really important you've had this sort of practice run, but make sure you have exactly the meal that you're used to the night before, no variables. And then when you do go to bed, just before you go to bed, make sure that you set yourself a couple of alarms. I did the Disney World Marathon in Orlando one year, and I relied on, I asked reception if they could give me an alarm call. For some reason, I don't know why, I didn't set my alarm on my phone. And of course, they forgot. So I woke up, looked at my watch and thought, oh my God, this race starts in about 15 minutes. So I was the last one on the start line. I was probably 10 minutes behind the last runner. I'd almost plead with them to let me start. So after that, I never relied on anybody. And I've always taken a little alarm clock with me and my phone, obviously, and set both alarms 10 minutes apart. Because oftentimes it will be early. I mean, you're very lucky in somewhere like London, because it's dead easy to get to the start. And, it's like generally about a 10 o'clock start for most people. So it's quite easy. Where you've got a 5 o'clock start or a 6 o'clock start, those early mornings can be quite challenging to get up. So, but rely on no one. That's the key message. And then you've got your kit preparation. So when do you do that? Well, you don't do that on the morning of the event. Do it the night before. It doesn't take long, obviously, but the more you can get done the night before, the better it will be on race day. You'll have less things to worry about. So generally speaking, in these bigger races, you will have a chip of some kind so they can track your progress. Doesn't happen that often in the very, very small races, but more and more now, because they want to give you your results, obviously. So you need a chip, timing chip, and that can either be in your race number or it can be a separate chip that you put on your shoe. So that needs to be done the night before. You attach your race number to your running vest or your shirt, and that will generally be with little safety pins still. Nothing's changed over the last 20 odd years with that generally. So get all that done beforehand, because you can guarantee that something will happen. You won't get it right first time getting that race number on. Make sure you have it away from sensitive parts of your body, let's put it like that, and make sure it sits perfectly for all your pictures, etc. Make sure it's nice and straight. And doing that the night before, you got plenty of time to tinker around and get that right. But make sure that you read all the instructions properly that you will have got in your race pack. There may be some little quirky differences from a race. If you've done a race before, they're not all the same. The chips are not always all the same. So just make sure you've taken into account exactly what the race organisers have asked you to do. Make sure you've got your old kit. If it's an early start and it's a cold morning forecast, take some old gear with you to the start, because you don't want to be taking too much nice stuff in case you don't end up getting it back at the finish. So generally speaking, a race like New York or London or Boston, it's a bit colder at the start. You're going to be hanging around for quite some time. In New York, I've done that a couple of times, and in New York, you will be waiting around for about 3 or 4 hours, and it will be cold. So you need to make sure you got plenty of gear with you, gear that you can just leave behind. This often goes to charities, so race organisers will arrange with a couple of charities that they come and pick all that gear up, so it's not ultimately going to be wasted. Really, really important to get that done. And with some of the races where you can have a long time to hang around, you also need to pack a book or something like that. When I did New York one year, I read a full 300 or 400 page book. I had that much time. If I hadn't had that amount of time, if I hadn't had a book with me, I don't really know what I'd have done for that length of time, because it is a long wait. New York's, again, a bit different because you've got to be over there before the main bridge closes. Some of these things, that one was one where I took a couple of bits of cardboard with me. I know it sounds a bit odd, but it's so cold sitting on the grass or on the concrete that a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that do this, they take a piece of cardboard and then they got something to sit on. And I was quite surprised at how many were actually doing that. So lots of stuff to be prepared for. And when you're in, when you get your race instructions, and generally you'll get these quite a few weeks before the race, have a look for that kind of thing, and see if there's anything in there that you need to be aware of that's different to an event you've done before. Right, so on to nutrition. So race morning nutrition. Now, again, because the long run acts as a warm-up almost for quite a few of them, you have 6, 7, 8 long runs, and you should regard each of these as a warm-up. You should have had a practice by now as to what it is you're actually going to eat on race morning. So this is why you need to work out, when are you going to get up? How much time are you going to give yourself? Because how much time do you need for food and drink beforehand? Generally speaking, not much. I always, and I've done this for years, just stuck with tea and toast, or a banana, or a muesli bar. But again, only a muesli bar that I'm used to. Nothing different, nothing in the race pack, for example, because oftentimes you'll get race packs that have got sponsor-based products in there. Don't eat anything different. So I will have a routine, a cup of black tea, toast with a little bit of margarine on, or a vegetarian spread or something. I'll take a banana and maybe a muesli bar, but not always. But tea and toast is a staple in my my race morning nutrition. I have seen many times runners in race hotels, where I've been staying in the race hotel, eating a full cooked breakfast, which I just don't know how that can be done. And it could be if you were used to having a cooked breakfast on your long runs, the morning of your long run, and you're totally used to it. Yeah, that's okay. It's not a brilliant idea though, because the amount of grease in those. But oftentimes when you're confronted with the options on a race morning, and there's a full cooked breakfast, not aimed obviously at the runners, people may well be tempted. I would be super cautious doing that unless you've got proof that works for you, and it may well do, but it would be quite odd, quite strange. But you stick to the basics, stick to something that you're absolutely used to and isn't going to cause you any aggravation. And of course, there can be occasions where you get to the start and there is some food and drink available. That again is not that common. There may be a caterer that's paid to be there and is offering a variety of options, some of them aimed at spectators rather than the runners. going back to New York briefly, one year when I did it, they had a Dunkin' Donuts sponsorship, and donuts were available to runners free of charge. And I was just baffled to see the amount of people, again, given that it's such a long wait, but the amount of people that were up and down to this Dunkin' Donuts van having free donuts. I mean, really not great idea. Unless, again, you're used to having donuts at the start of your long runs. And I'm not sure how many of us fall into that category. But, if it's proven to work for you, great. But I suspect for those that hadn't eaten a lot of donuts prior to a long run, that they would have probably parted company with those donuts at some point along the course. So how do we get to the start? Well, again, this is where you need to make sure you are planning well in advance. Somewhere like London, again, relatively easy. It's all really clearly laid out in the race day instructions that you'll get. And they all are, to be fair, with all these races, some better than others. But when you're looking at one of the majors, for example, or any of the other big ones like Paris or Amsterdam, any of these, it's all really clearly laid out. But again, you've just got to make sure you read it all, because it can be clearly laid out. And a lot of people just turn up at the nearest station to where they're staying and go, right, well, presume there's some trains soon. And there might not be. They might be at just given times and you might have just missed one. So make sure you know and you plan in advance. Some of them are a lot harder than others. New York's probably one of the hardest. Boston is not easy either. You've got to get up early and you've got to get buses that are put on by the organisers, and those take you to the start. So Boston's an out and back, and you've got to go to quite a small little town, basically 26 miles from Boston. And you've got to go on one of their organised buses. Same with New York, their organised buses very early in the morning. You can't rely on public transport. This is why it's a good idea on occasions to start to book your hotel really near the start, where you've got a super early start and you're relying on the race transport. Sometimes it can be great just to get yourself a hotel near the start. You haven't got to stress about any of that activity. I did the Big Sur International Marathon in Southern California last year. And again, I was reliant there on buses, but brilliantly organised in that occasion. And they all are, to be fair to them. But that was, again, I had probably a 20-minute walk to the nearest bus pickup point. Example there, I hadn't researched in advance where those bus pickup points were before I booked my hotel. I just looked and thought, well, it's about 3 miles to 2 or 3 miles from the start area. I should be fine. But actually, things changed around a bit. They had a problem there with the race start that year. Part of the course got washed away, which complicated things a little bit. But I hadn't researched that properly. So I had a longer walk than I would have liked in the morning. And that was another early start to get the bus pickups. So generally speaking, where there is public transport involved, they will put on extra trains or buses, public buses, but don't rely on it, and make sure you have done plenty of research, because the last thing you need is stress on race morning, particularly if it's your first race or your first big race. You need to make sure that you're absolutely in control of your day. So the more preparation that you do in advance, the better things will be. So you're there, you've had your food and drink, you're enjoying what's going on, you're looking around, you're absorbing everything. What's that final hour like? Well, that's a really interesting time, because you just want to get going. You don't want to be hanging around anymore. Particularly on one of the big races, you are surrounded by thousands of people and you want to get going. But it's really important that you don't let nerves get the better of you. Make sure you've been to the toilets beforehand. There will be again, generally speaking, and at the big events more and more, there are a lot of these portable toilets, but that means a lot of people, and the queues will be significant. Obviously, it is a bit easier for the gents rather than the ladies at these things, because gents tend to wander off and find trees, which obviously the organisers do frown on, but it's inevitable that's going to happen. But if you want to empty your bowels, then you are in for a long wait. Some people do take toilet paper with them. Not a lot of people. You do see it occasionally, because you can't guarantee that there's going to be toilet paper left in these portable toilets. But it's just getting the queues early. And that's why I always aim to get to the start of these races at least an hour to an hour and a half beforehand. I really enjoy just the atmosphere, the camaraderie at the start of these races, just people watching, because there are so many people from different walks of life at these races, and it's just great to chat to people. Everyone's got a story. A lot of people have traveled extensively, and it's just great to be part of it. And if you're there early, then go to the toilet early and get that job done. There's also, generally in these bigger races, you're gonna need to take your kit bag to the baggage truck. So the smaller races, there might just be a tent. But with the big races, there will be a lot of trucks all lined up, and you pop your kit bag into the truck that corresponds with your race number. Do that early, because this race that I did in Big Sur, the queue was huge, probably at least half an hour, and you just don't want that early morning. You just want to get on with stuff, and you want to do your own thing. You don't be reliant on others. So get that done early, and then do some very gentle warming up. You still be in your old gear at this stage that you've taken with you, gear that you're going to leave behind. So do some gentle warming up, but again, no static stretches. Obviously, you're doing dynamic stretches at this stage. Your muscles are going to be cold. So just lunges and things like that. There'll be lots of people doing things that are not appropriate. There will be a lot of static stretches. There'll be a lot of sprinting going on and this kind of stuff. Don't get distracted. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Watch it. It is fascinating. Just be really relaxed and just be your own person. Don't worry about other stuff. Chances are you're probably going to end up being asked to move into your start area half an hour or so before the start goes off, before the start gun goes off. Keep aware of announcements. There's often a DJ and an announcer there who'll be telling you what's happening. Listen out. Remember what race number you are and when your start is. Then generally the big races, they all go off exactly when they say they're going to. So make sure you are in place plenty of time in advance. You won't be able to generally go into a corral or a start area faster than the one you put down on your race number, on your race entry, but you may be able to go back. So if you're not feeling it and you want to go back a couple of start and wave start areas, then you can do that, generally speaking, no problem. And I keep saying generally, and it is because races are very different. There can be a lot of changes. You may find that you could move back a start area very, very, very easily in one race, but try it in another race, and they might say, no, you should have made that change online before you got it a few weeks ago. So play it by ear. If you feel you want to move back, ask the question. If it doesn't happen, then so be it. Again, at this point, you've still got your old clothes on, your warm clothes on. And I'm talking now about races, obviously, where it is a bit chilly. Some races you go and it might be 20 odd degrees at the start. I did Singapore Marathon a few years ago, and that was about 25 degrees at the start at 5 a.m, I think it was. So no need for any old thick clothes at that point. That was a whole different experience. You don't need to get rid of the gear until, not when the gun goes off, but when you actually start running. And in a race like London, it can be quite a few minutes before you actually start running. So you get this big crescendo of the gun going off. Everyone's getting very excited because they're about to start, but actually they're not about to start. It could be quite a few minutes. I've run London in fancy dress most of the time, and I had to wait. One year, I was right at the back. I had to wait over 20 minutes to actually start running. Now that won't be the case for most people. You'll be gone after a few minutes, but don't just hear the gun and get rid of all your stuff. You could be waiting around quite a bit. So as soon as you start running, rip your gear off, put it to the side of the road. Don't just chuck it on the floor for people to trip on. Get it to the side, and then hopefully someone will come and pick it up and make good use of it. And then you're away. And we will talk about your race strategy in another podcast. But for now, prepare, enjoy the preparation, and just remember, the more prep that you put into your race, the better your race is going to be. I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.